some people risk everything to save others, even their own lives. In this video, we'll look at 5 real stories of people who made the ultimate sacrifice. Their heroic actions saved lives, but they didn't survive. These are powerful stories of bravery, selflessness, and the high cost of saving others. It was February 24th, 2022. Ukraine trembled under the first wave of the Russian invasion. Chaos erupted as Russian forces pushed their way into the country, fast and ruthless. Every moment mattered. Every road, every bridge, critical. One of those was the Henichesk Bridge in Kherson Province, a lifeline that connected Russian-occupied Crimea to mainland Ukraine. If Russian troops crossed it, the path into Ukraine's heartland would be wide open. The stakes? Nothing less than the fate of a nation. There was only one option: destroy the bridge. The man given that impossible task was just 25 years old. Vitali Voladovich, a combat engineer with the Ukrainian Marines. But to the people who knew him, he was much more than that. Born on August 19, 1996 in the small town of Berezhany in western Ukraine, Vitali had grown up with a quiet determination. He went to school where his mother taught, studied welding, and even worked construction in Poland. He wasn't the kind of guy who looked for recognition, but when duty called, he answered, always. On that cold morning, with Russian tanks rumbling ever closer, Vitali's unit received the order: rig the Henichesk Bridge with explosives and bring it down before the enemy could cross. The mission was dangerous. The timing had to be perfect. One mistake could mean capture or death. Vitali didn't hesitate. He volunteered. Under intense pressure, he worked quickly, planting mines under the bridge as the thunder of war grew louder in the distance. He could hear them coming. The Russian forces were moving in fast, too fast. As he finished the setup, a chilling realization set in. There wasn't enough time to escape. He made the call. One last message to his unit. His voice calm despite everything. Them what he was about to do. Moments later, the bridge erupted in fire and smoke. The explosion shattered the silence and the Russian advance. The enemy was stopped in its tracks. Vitali was gone, but his sacrifice bought Ukraine precious time to regroup, time to resist, time to fight back. 2 days later, the president of Ukraine posthumously awarded him the Order of the Gold Star, Ukraine's highest military honor. The military confirmed what everyone already knew. Vitali's sacrifice wasn't just brave. It was the kind of courage most people only read about. The kind that changes the course of history. His comrades mourned him deeply. One soldier remembered the last words they heard. He contacted us and told us what he was going to do. Shortly after, the explosion happened. They all knew what he'd done and why he'd done it. Word of his act didn't stay within Ukraine's borders. His name echoed around the world. People from every corner of the globe shared his story. In his hometown of Berezhany, the community gathered to say goodbye, heads bowed and hearts heavy. Images from his funeral were shared widely, heartbreaking, solemn, unforgettable. His legacy grew beyond his homeland. A street in Prague was proposed to be renamed in his honor. He was granted honorary citizenship in both Berezhany and Leszno, Poland, where he once worked. These weren't just symbolic gestures. They were reminders that courage like his touches lives far beyond a battlefield. Ukraine's military leaders called him a symbol of resilience. They vowed to fight on with his memory in their hearts. The Henichesk Bridge, once a key target, had become something more, a symbol of resistance, a line drawn in fire and blood. People still ask, what if he'd escaped? What if he'd found a way out? Would the Russians have crossed faster? Would Ukrainian troops have had the time they needed to prepare? No one can answer those questions. It was January 13, 1982, and Washington, D.C. was caught in the grip of a brutal snowstorm. Despite the dangerous conditions, Air Florida Flight 90 was cleared for takeoff from Washington National Airport, bound for Miami. The flight had already been delayed, and the plane had been de-iced. But with the hours dragging on and fresh snow falling, more ice had begun to silently creep back onto its wings. Among the 79 passengers was 46-year-old Arland D. Williams Jr., a quiet, dependable bank examiner from Georgia, a man who'd been through a lot: divorce, the challenges of single fatherhood, and the weight of responsibility. Still, he stayed grounded, committed to his kids, his work, and was even preparing for a second chance at love. This trip was just supposed to be routine, a work trip, nothing more. But fate had something else in store. At 4:01 p.m., the plane roared down the icy runway and lifted into the stormy sky. Something was wrong. Immediately, the engine strained and the aircraft trembled as it failed to gain altitude. The co-pilot suggested aborting. Too late. Just seconds later, the Boeing 737 clipped the 14th Street Bridge, crushing cars in its path, and then slammed into the frozen Potomac River. Out of the 79 souls on board, only 6 survived the impact. They were battered, soaked, and clinging desperately to the wreckage in the freezing water. It was pure chaos. The current was strong, the temperatures deadly, and every second mattered. Arland Williams was one of those survivors, injured but alert. And while panic consumed the scene, Williams did something that no one expected. He put everyone else first. On the shore, horrified bystanders called for help, watching helplessly as the broken pieces of the plane bobbed in the icy river. A hospital worker, Roger Olean, tied a rope around his waist and tried to swim to the wreckage, but the current was merciless. Then, about 20 minutes after the crash, salvation arrived in the sky. A U.S. Park Police helicopter known as Eagle One, piloted by Donald Usher with paramedic Melvin Windsor on board. The helicopter hovered low, battling the wind and sleet, and lowered a lifeline to the survivors. Williams grabbed it, but instead of securing himself, he handed it off, again and again. First, to flight attendant Nikki Felch, then to another survivor. He passed that rope not once, not twice, but every single time it came his way. He even gave a flotation ring to a woman who had drifted from the wreckage, helping her stay afloat. In those final minutes, his only focus was on the people around him. He was the strongest one left, but never thought of saving himself. The helicopter returned again and again. Each time, Williams deferred. Each time, he chose someone else. And then, he was gone. When Eagle One made its final return, Arland Williams had disappeared beneath the icy surface. The man who had been fully capable of saving himself had instead sacrificed his life so that others could live. The 5 other survivors owed their lives to his choice, his calm, his courage, his absolute selflessness. News of the crash and Williams' heroism quickly spread across the country. At first, no one even knew his name. The press called him the man in the water. But when authorities finally identified him, the story became even more haunting. He wasn't a superhero. He was a father, a fiancé, a regular man with an ordinary job. But in the most terrifying moment imaginable, he became extraordinary. President Ronald Reagan posthumously awarded him the Coast Guard's Gold Life-Saving Medal, and his name was etched into history. His hometown of Mattoon, Illinois, named a school after him. Washington, D.C., renamed the very bridge the plane struck, the 14th Street Bridge, as the Arland D. Williams Jr. Memorial Bridge. His alma mater, the Citadel, established a society in his honor to recognize exceptional service and created a professorship bearing his name. There's one haunting thought that lingers. What if he had held on to that rope? What if, just once, he had chosen to save himself, but that wasn't who he was? It was the early hours of June 30th, 2024, in the quiet West Bank settlement of Kochav-Yakov. Inside one modest home, the Zahavi family slept. 2 parents, 9 children, unaware that everything was about to change. Then, just past 2:30 a.m., a sudden flash. An electric bicycle battery had caught fire. The flames were instant, brutal, and merciless. Smoke surged through the house like a tidal wave, thick and suffocating. One moment they were sleeping, the next they were fighting for their lives. Adena Zahavi, 45 years old, a mother of 9, was jolted awake. She didn't pause. There was no time. She and her husband Aryeh jumped into action as the fire roared around them. Their children, still groggy, some barely out of dreams, were lost in the chaos. The air was poison, visibility near zero. But through the black smoke, Adena had one thought, one instinct: get them out. All of them. She wasn't just running on fear. She was fueled by something far deeper: love. She moved from room to room, grabbing, guiding, shouting through the noise and heat. One by one, the children stumbled into the night air, coughing and crying, but alive. But Adena didn't stop. She could have. She could have stayed outside, safe, her job as a mother fulfilled. But she wasn't done. She ran back inside. Then again. The smoke thickened. The fire grew angrier. She kept going. By the time the last child was out, Adena didn't emerge. She had made it just far enough. The toxic fumes, the unbearable heat, it caught up to her. She collapsed before help could reach her. Paramedics fought to bring her back, but it was too late. She was gone. The shock rippled through her family like aftershocks from a quake. Arye and several of the children were hospitalized for smoke inhalation. Neighbors who tried to help were shaken. The house, everything they owned, was destroyed. But all 9 children survived. Because of her. Adena wasn't just a mother. She was the quiet kind of hero that never asks to be noticed. She had immigrated to Israel from the U.S. years earlier, building a life filled with meaning. She worked with special needs students, mentored young people, and opened her home to anyone who needed a place to feel safe. She wasn't loud about her kindness. She just was, reliable, strong, endlessly compassionate. Even when life was hard, raising 9 kids, stretched thin, pregnant, and exhausted, she made time for others. Late-night drives just to check in on a friend. Heart-to-hearts over tea, a warm smile that made you feel like you mattered. That's what made her final act so heartbreakingly true to who she was. She didn't hesitate, not once. Her friend Rachel later said, she never looked for praise. She just did what needed to be done. And in those final minutes, what needed to be done was everything. She gave it all. After the fire, the community was shaken. The head of the Binyamin Regional Council visited the ruins and could barely speak through the grief. She didn't think twice, he said. She was a lioness. Her husband, dazed but alive, simply repeated the truth everyone already knew. She put her children before herself. Always had, always would. At her funeral, her brother stood over her grave, stunned. Who would have thought the first family funeral I'd attend would be hers? He asked, his voice breaking. Her children, now motherless, held one another close, trying to understand how the heartbeat of their home was suddenly gone. The questions still linger. Could the fire have been prevented? Could she have made it out? Could something, anything, have saved her? But for all the what-ifs, there's one truth that echoes louder. She chose them. In her final moments, she didn't run. She turned back into the fire, again and again. And because she did, 9 lives continued. Adena Zahavi's story is not just a tragedy. It's a testament, a reminder that real courage isn't loud or flashy. Sometimes it's a mother stepping back into a burning house, not for glory, but for love. She gave everything she had. Her legacy will live on in every life she saved and every heart she touched. Because heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear pajamas, stand barefoot on cold tile floors, and make the choice no one should ever have to make. And sometimes they don't come back. It was November 11th, 2024. Children at the Macedon Ranges Montessori preschool were playing in the safety of their fenced-in yard, completely unaware of the danger that was about to tear through their world. Then came the sound. At first, it didn't register, just another truck on the nearby road. But then it swerved. A water tanker, massive and out of control, veered violently from the street. In a split second, the vehicle was no longer on the road. It was inside the playground. In the middle of it all was 43-year-old Eleanor Bryant, a speech pathologist. She didn't hesitate. The moment she saw the truck barreling toward them, she acted. She ran straight into its path, not away from it. Her focus was pure. The children. Get them out. Push them to safety. Save them. Local resident Walter Lucas watched it unfold from across the street. "She saved that kid's life by putting herself in danger," he later said. "She's more than a hero. She's a superhero." But there wasn't enough time. Eleanor managed to shield several children, guiding them to safety. She even got the child she was working with out of the truck's direct path, but she couldn't save herself. The tanker struck her. The impact was fatal. She died on the scene. The driver, a 68-year-old man from Broadford, was seriously injured. Emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, but he was in no condition to speak. Authorities suspected a medical episode caused the crash, but they needed time to confirm it. The preschool was closed. For Riddell's Creek, a town familiar with the distant thunder of passing trucks but not with this kind of grief, it was more than a tragedy. It was a wound that wouldn't heal quickly. Eleanor's family were devastated. Flowers appeared at the preschool gates. The 3-year-old boy she saved was rushed to Royal Children's Hospital. His injuries were serious, but he was alive because of her. Beyond the preschool, Eleanor was a cornerstone of her community. She was the uniform coordinator for a local basketball club, the kind of person who worked behind the scenes without expecting credit. The club's social media tribute called her an amazing mom and wife who gave everything. Authorities are still reviewing CCTV footage, looking for answers. The cause, whether it was a medical event, mechanical failure, or something else, is still being pieced together. But for many in Riddell's Creek, the investigation is background noise to the deafening silence left in Eleanor's absence. It was supposed to be a peaceful family getaway, just sand, sun, and memories made by the ocean. On October 9th, 2024, the Graves family gathered on Dauphin Island, Alabama, to enjoy one of those rare, golden days where generations come together, laughing, unwinding, soaking in each other's company. But that day would become etched in their hearts forever for a reason no one saw coming. Charles Chuck Graves was the kind of man who held families together. A devoted husband, proud father, loving grandfather. At 75, he wasn't one to sit on the sidelines of life. His heart was full of stories, some from his time in the Navy, some from the decades working hard to provide, and most from the moments he cherished with his grandchildren. That day, he was watching them play in the shallows. Then, everything changed. A rip current, a silent, swift force, caught his 5-year-old grandson. In an instant, the child was pulled farther from shore, his small frame no match for the water's strength. Shouts echoed, panic surged, and without hesitation, Chuck moved. No second thoughts, no fear, just action. He dove into the current, his body cutting through the waves with a determination that defied his age. He reached the boy, secured him, and passed him to another family member, safe, alive, out of danger. But something was wrong. Chuck didn't follow them back. He didn't swim toward shore. He simply floated, still. For a terrifying moment, his family thought he might be drowning. But it wasn't the water that had claimed him. It was his heart. The effort, the adrenaline, the overwhelming toll of the rescue had triggered a fatal heart attack. First, responders rushed to his aid. They pulled him from the surf and airlifted him to the hospital. But the damage had already been done. The man who had given everything for his family had taken his final breath doing what he always did, protecting them. His daughter-in-law, Valerie Belt, would later say they believed he knew something was wrong, that maybe in those last moments he felt it. But even then, he chose to save his grandson first, because that's who Chuck was. Born in Paducah, Kentucky, he'd spent a life working hard and loving harder. After 4 years of service in the U.S. Navy and a career at a power plant, Chuck retired to Estero, Florida, where he spent his days fishing and planning trips to see his kids and grandkids. He and his wife Maura had been married since 1975, closing in on 50 years of partnership filled with laughter, love, and the kind of small moments that grow into legacies. He never missed a chance to bring the family together. He wanted them all in one place, sharing meals, telling stories, watching the little ones run barefoot through the sand. He lived for that. And when it came down to one final moment, he died for it too. The grandson he saved survived because of his courage, and the family he left behind will forever carry the weight and wonder of what he did that day. There's no medal that could capture what Chuck Graves gave, no ceremony that could fully honor what he meant, but in the heart of a little boy who still gets to grow up, and in the quiet strength of a family that knows their patriarch died a hero, his legacy will live on. Some heroes wear uniforms, others carry fishing rods, tell corny jokes, and never miss a birthday. Chuck was one of those, the kind of man who, when the moment came, didn't hesitate. And in that final, unforgettable act, he showed what love really looks like.